Do you notice how I never have a formal type opening prayer or some introductory music or some sort of fandangled title page that has music going with it or whatever? Have you noticed that? It's because if you want that, then it's a personal thing. Do it before you turn the video on that you're watching. I don't want to waste your time listening to some idiotic prayer or idiotic opening scene that has nothing to do with the subject matter. And furthermore, who am I to force upon you whatever belief system you have that I need to conform to some sort of prayer or whatever? Personally, I have my own prayer before I start making a video. And that prayer could be 3 or 4 minutes, or it could be hours prior to me pushing the button to start this video. And that's 100% of the time. But I think it's pretentious to include that as part of the video, because I'm hoping, or what I'd like to do is appeal to a wide, even though I don't get very many people watching the videos, I appeal to a wide variety of belief systems, views. I mean, anywheres from people that are avowed witches, Jewish, Christian, Hindu, followers of Sanatana Dharma, any number of views. So I won't start with an opening like this ever again. I just wanted to explain why I just jump right into the subject material, and that I don't do it with no forethought, or I don't do it without an opening prayer or this or that or whatever. I do it. I include that prior to pushing the record button. Anyways, the subject matter that I wanted to cover is, in spite of all the written and recorded teachings that have been around for thousands upon thousands of years, there is absolutely no general process that helps a person or shines the light on the proper teachings that will convert a person to becoming enlightened. Jesus didn't do it. Krishna didn't do it. Buddha didn't do it. Lao Tzu didn't do it. The apostles of Jesus didn't do it. The philosophers don't do it. There is no universal. Not only is there no universal, but the fact that all of this, these Bibles and Vedas and the Bhagavad Gitas and all of these written, as well as commentaries, as well as massive organizations with billions and billions of followers with Christianity and all these other teachings, and yet none of them convert to produce people that are enlightened, spiritually enlightened. None of them do. And in fact, in every instance, if you read the history or you follow the history, in every instance, those that were recognized as being spiritually enlightened were castigated by the existing organizations. Jesus was hung on a cross and killed. Buddha was following a path that nobody else was following. Krishna, there's, again, all of these individuals that you recognize as truly enlightened were renegades, essentially. And yet, for some reason, people continue to follow these assumed paths that are organized, well-known, well-trodden, thinking, insanely of course, thinking that they are going to become enlightened. And they are not, while following those paths, while reading those books, while participating in the rituals. It's not going to happen. It's never going to happen. And why? Why? Let me tell you a little story. I know this is a stupid story because I made it up just yesterday thinking about the analogy as why. Why is it people do not convert to the awareness of enlightenment? Why is that so rare? So rare as to any normal person that has studied enough would know that there are no popular individuals on this planet that are recognized as being enlightened. Yeah, there's plenty of them that are, I'm not going to name names, but there's plenty that the populace that are part of those organizations would say, oh yeah, wow, this person is enlightened and they have sold 5 or 10 million books and everybody, but they're not enlightened and they don't understand what reality truly is. The followers may believe it, but you know that it isn't true. When I say you know, I mean who knew that Jesus was enlightened when he was alive? Not very many. So this stupid analogy here, I shouldn't be self-denigrating, but I'm going to tell you a little story. And this will explain why people do not become enlightened. So I'll tell a little story about building homes, because I am personally experienced in that. I built many homes. So here's my story. I hammered up the blueprints on every job. I hammered them to the wall so that you could refer to the blueprints every time you needed to follow instructions. And on a different occasion, I hammered my thumb. Oh my God, did it hurt. Blood was spurting out all over the place. I could go on with that story, but you're never, ever, ever, ever going to question what is a hammer. You're never going to question me on that because you know what a hammer is. But I'm not talking about a hammer. I substituted the word hammer for tape. I taped the blueprints up on the wall. I taped my thumb because I smashed it. I didn't hammer it with a hammer. I smashed it with whatever you want to call the tool or whatever. But I taped it. You're never going to question me about the concept of a hammer because you already know what a hammer is. So the story goes in the Bible, in all the Hindu scriptures, the Vedas. It's the same thing about the deity, God, Brahman. All of the stories in all the scriptures refer to God in the same sense that I referred to a hammer as being actual tape, and not what you thought it was. But you're led to believe your view, your ideas, your thoughts of what God is. And of course, you can't be my reference of God enlightened. You can't be God enlightened when your perception of what God is a hammer, when in fact it's tape. There is no possibility. You can't study masking tape and understand the mechanics of a hammer. You have to actually study what a hammer is to understand what a hammer is. You can't study what God is from the resources that are available to you in this reality and ever expect to become God enlightened. It's impossible. It can't happen. I've said this before in some other videos, and I'll say it again. As well as Jesus made it crystal clear. He says, this world is not the world where I am king. He said other things like the natural man or our bodies or our physical awareness is an enemy to God. When you read or study the Brahma Sutras that are interpreted by Adi Shankar, you are going to get his interpretations, the non-duality interpretation of the Brahma Sutras. You're not going to understand the Brahma Sutras. You're going to understand his perverted understandings. You can read Christian scriptures and you can read and study Hindu writings. But it isn't going to come out and be clear as to what God is. Your belief in what you think God is isn't real. It's the interpretation of someone. Do I believe that the original Sanskrit was inspired by God in some fashion? Yeah, absolutely I do. Do I believe that what we currently have in our hands, disposable to read and understand, that is inspired in an accurate interpretation of what reality is? No, absolutely not. And I don't believe the same about the Holy Bible. That the God of this world, which I refer to as Shiva, or Lucifer, or Satan, or call it whatever you want, this God is always going to change the meanings of what God is to lead you towards Him. Always. I mean, think of it in a practical manner. For instance, put yourself in the shoes of the God of this realm, this reality. Wouldn't you, if you were the God of this reality, wouldn't you alter everything over the course of time? Since you are immortal, eternal, you have complete and utter control over this reality in many ways, shapes, and forms, and especially the interpretation of these writings. For instance, I can write something, but after I'm dead, or who's to say even what I'm writing is not written correctly? What I know is very correct, but I might use the word incorrectly and refer to a hammer as tape, or tape as a hammer. My interpretation, or the way I present it, may very well be incorrect. But that doesn't mean I don't understand it. That doesn't mean I'm not enlightened. That doesn't mean I don't know who God is. All that means is the way I present it is incorrect, because of the inability of my physical body and brain and mind to put it in a way as to present it correctly. For instance, my wife loves me. But there's a lot of people that hate me. How is that possible? It's because my wife doesn't use the normal physical senses and abilities to discern what reality is. So she sees something beyond what I appear to be. You can't take the normal interpretations of what reality is reading and get an accurate view of what God is. And since you can't, what that means is if what you think aligns with what is written, then you aren't going to ever become enlightened, and in addition to, you're never going to become God enlightened while you maintain that thinking, that belief. There's a very difficult, so here's a teaching that's very, very common in Eastern philosophy with gurus and stuff. That you go from one level of bliss and joy to the next level of bliss and joy, and that if you're on the right path, it just becomes better and better and better and better. But this isn't true. That is a false teaching. And when people think that that is the path to enlightenment and knowing the truth of all things and God, then they will be led down a path that doesn't align with what is really truth. Because they are thinking that, well, they are living a life of bliss and joy, and so they're thinking, well, where's the next step? Where's the next bliss? And if they happen to fall onto the right path, and they go, whoa, 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 I'm having great difficulty here. This is extremely dissatisfying to me. I don't like what this person is teaching. I hate what that person is teaching. So much so that, like Jesus, it's like, well, let's kill this person to shut them up. Or like social media nowadays. If this person is teaching the truth and it just so happens that they're getting a lot of notoriety, let's take them down. That's the way it works. It isn't a comfortable path. And when they talk about, I got a bug flying around, I hate that. When they talk about bliss and joy and all those things, they don't know what the hell they're talking about. Do I have bliss and joy? Absolutely I do. But it isn't what you've been taught. It's the hammer tape scenario. You don't know what bliss is. I assure you, you do not know what bliss is. You do not know what joy is. Because you think it's something that is a physical thing. You think that it's something that you accomplished and you're aware or whatever. It isn't that at all. That is fake. And you're never going to find bliss and joy because you don't know what it is. You've not been taught what it is. Bliss and joy can only occur when you are on the path with the true God. Not with Shiva. Not with Satan. There's no bliss and joy on that path. Unless you find bliss and joy with great wealth, power, notoriety. No, that's a different thing. The bliss and joy I'm talking about, and what is talked about in Scripture, which has been perverted to make you believe something else, is something that only is within your heart and soul. That's where the bliss comes from. That's true bliss. That's something that can't be taken away. It isn't contingent upon things of this reality. The bliss doesn't go away because you lose your job, you lose your home, you were kicked to the gutter, you have family members die, you get a sickness, a deathly sickness, whatever. The real bliss and joy isn't contingent upon those things. The real bliss and joy is like Jesus said, when you drink from the fountain that I am offering, it's eternal. Ever, forever welling up. He was, of course, speaking analogous to the type of bliss and joy that is absolutely real. So that's why you will never become God enlightened, spiritually enlightened, because it's impossible following the path that is well trodden. There's a concept called reading between the lines. So, yeah, if you, so to say, read between the lines from a spiritual point of view, You will find truth in all of these spiritual writings, but it's between the lines. It isn't apparent. Why is it between the lines? Because it has been corrupted by the God of this realm. So it isn't going to be apparent. But people think that it's apparent. And so that's why they never find what they're searching for. And if you're searching for it for the wrong reasons, you're never going to find it. There's another concept that I've taught that is, if I were to teach you the only possible way that you become God enlightened, if I were to teach you that and explain it to you, and you didn't do it on your own, you instead learned it from me, I think, now I'm not saying I'm sure, but I think it would hinder you from becoming God enlightened, because you have to do it on your own. You have to find out that tape hammer type scenario. You have to find that out on your own. You can't learn it from me and then go, oh, aha, now I understand because the way he explained it. Yeah, okay. No, you can't. You have to go through the heartbreaking misery that is devastating beyond compare to become God enlightened. I can't show you the shortcut and then you find it. But why do I do that? Why do I teach it? Well, I do, and I can explain it again real quickly in a minute. But the reason I do is because it's like me, for instance. How is it possible that I went through that process to discover God enlightenment? How did I do that? Did I do it because I'm so wonderful and I'm so great and I'm so spiritually inclined that God loved me so much that he eventually showed himself to me and then I became God enlightened? Is that the reason? Of course not. Of course not. It happened because someone like me in a former life taught me these things as I am today teaching you. And then you die of old age or whatever, and then you reincarnate again. And then you go, oh, I just thought of something that is really bizarre. Nobody else has ever thought of this. And maybe that is the pathway to enlightenment in God. Because I'm thinking differently than everybody else. I didn't do that because I was born with this innate ability. Absolutely not. I did it because someone helped me in a former life. That is how it takes place. Think about it. Could you exist without God, the Creator, Brahma? Could you exist without that? Of course you couldn't. You're an idiot if you think otherwise. Could you understand the things or benefit from what Jesus accomplished in his life? In other words, was Jesus just a waste of life? Of course not, especially if you're a Christian. How about Buddha? How about Krishna? For those of you that are Hindu, how about Shiva? Of course not. They did something. They accomplished something. They served a purpose to help. They didn't do it just for selfish reasons. God didn't create reality for God's own selfish reality. God did it for you. Jesus died on the cross for you, it is said. So holding that path and that pattern, why do I make videos? For you. Because they helped, I can help. But Jesus isn't here anymore. But his teachings live. And Buddha isn't here anymore. But his teachings exist. Where's God? But God's creation exists. You're never going to question a hammer in the story. You're never going to question the foundation of what reality is because you think you know. Rather than saying you think you know, and yet you're wrong. And when you keep living your life knowing that you know, you will never turn the rock over to find out what's under it because you know. You're never going to question what God is because you know. Because why? Because you've read and you've studied the ancient teachings of the God of this realm. So you know, but the God of this realm always directs reality back to him. You have to go beyond this reality to find these truths. So as I've said before, how is it that you become God enlightened? In a short sentence, it requires a paradox to occur. Because there's no valid reason for God to have one-on-one contact with an individual. There's no valid reason that I'm aware of because this reality is just one reality out of an infinite number of realities that you have not only gone through to get to this process, but that you will continue to go through in other processes. And in this particular process, this particular realm, this particular life that you're living is like a testing ground or an experiential reality with incredible opposition, and it isn't necessary in this particular realm for you to become God enlightened. That is something for another realm or another reality or whatever. This particular realm, you are born into existence without the knowledge, without the experiential knowledge. And it's meant to be that way so that you can function based upon your faith without any evidential proof. And this is why so many people cling to their Vedas and cling to their Bhagavad Gitas and cling to their gurus and cling to their Bibles and cling and go, this is what God is, this is what reality is, because they don't have anything beyond that. They live in fear, they live in confusion, they don't know. And so they brainwash themselves into knowing that, oh, well, this is what reality is. This is what God is. Because it's too fearful to think that nobody knows what God is. Or the fact that there is no God. So they're too fearful. So instead, they cling to what they hope is reflective of God. And of course, it's wrong. The paradox has to get to the point where you love God as Jesus loved God, to the point that your love, bhakti, is so pure that it isn't contingent upon anything. It doesn't matter. It is 100% perfect. And I mean perfect in the sense that it is comparable to the love that Jesus had. That comparable. Or Krishna, or call it whatever focus you can focus on and say, yes, that is the pure essence of love. Then you personally have to have that within your heart and soul. And then that has to be confronted with a challenge that is so powerful that you know that God doesn't love you, and yet you love God with the love that I just expressed. When that scenario plays out in real time, in this particular realm, where it isn't necessary to become God enlightened, where it isn't necessary. When that scenario plays out, and you have thrown in the towel, because to you it's real, you've thrown in the towel. You lament every moment of every day with tears in your eyes, the sadness of knowing Brahma, God, the God that Jesus prayed to, doesn't love you. Couldn't give a shit about you. And in fact, you know you're going to spend eternity in hell. And at that point, you love God as Jesus did, so fully that with absolute love and compassion, without the least degree of hatred, distrust, or anything else, that you trust God so much that you welcome, with tears in your eyes, the thought of spending eternity in hell. This is Christian thinking or Christian analogy, but you can think of it in Hindu teachings also in a similar format. When you get to that point, the true God, Brahma, of all reality, just can't allow you personally to go on in the rest of your physical life thinking wrongly that this God doesn't love you. He can't do it. And why? Because God loves you so much. Just like if you had a child, and as a parent, let's say you loved that child, because most parents actually don't love their children to the same extent that God loves you or that Jesus loved God. Most parents, like the vast majority of most parents, don't have that kind of love for their children, even though it's universally understood that they do. It isn't true. But if you did have, as a parent, so much love in your heart for your child, and you knew beyond shadow of a doubt your oldest child, an adult child, so that you know that the child has the cognitive ability to understand what reality is and to understand you personally if you talk to them. And you're aware of the fact that your child that isn't living with you anymore because they've moved away or whatever, and you find out that, and you know for a certainty that your child thinks that you don't love them, and is so distraught over this that maybe your child is thinking of suicide or whatever. I mean, it's so distraught, and only because they think that you don't love them. Well, as a parent with perfect love for the child, the parent can't allow that. Let's say the parent could be thinking, I was going to keep my distance because it was an important thing that I keep out of my child's life for this period of time, but I can't. I can't let my child think for another moment that I don't love them. I just can't. It hurts me to the core. I'm sorry. I don't know what the consequences are, but I'm going to have to contact my son, my daughter, or whoever, and let them know, no, I absolutely do love you. I'm sorry somehow that you thought that, but it isn't true. That's the paradox that has to take place to become God enlightened. If you go through your entire existence in this reality or this realm, time after time after time, thinking that God loves you and you love God, then you're never going to become God enlightened. It's not possible. It's impossible. Why is it impossible? Because this life, this realm, this reality is designed in such a way that you aren't supposed to ever have one-on-one with God. Meaning you're aware that God is real and talking to you and controlling all aspects of reality and everything. When I say reality, not the essences, thinking ability, but that this contact that takes place is not meant to be. You're meant to make choices and challenge yourself based upon the concept that you don't know what God is. You don't know what God thinks. You don't know that God loves you. You don't know that what God does or doesn't love. And for this very reason, the false God runs everything, controls everything. The hammer tape scenario. The God you think is real isn't the hammer. It's the tape. That's the problem. You don't know what God is. You don't know what God thinks. If you did, you would be convinced that God hates you. Not hate, because you know that God is, you get to the point where you'll know, well, God doesn't hate or this or that or whatever, but God doesn't love me. If you don't think that, you will never become God enlightened. It isn't possible. But again, as I've said, I keep trying to hammer this home. It isn't meant to be. You can become one with God without ever having one-on-one with God, meaning God enlightenment. At least I think you can. Because this isn't the only reality. There's numerous lives and experiences and realities and in different realms. And just because a kalpa of time happens to be billions and billions and billions of years doesn't mean that there aren't other realities in addition to the kalpa of time that you go through in your progression to get to where you are right now. And beyond that, in other realities and realms. But in this particular one, it isn't necessary to become God enlightened. But if you do, that is the process. And since I'm already telling you that, I don't think it's possible for you to become God enlightened, because you're always going to think, oh, well, if this guy's telling the truth, I can never think that God doesn't love me, because he said God does love me. So I've made it impossible for you to become God enlightened. But that doesn't mean I've made it impossible for you not to become God enlightened in a next life. Because nothing is ever, 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 ever lost. Maybe I'm saying this wrong, but a thought came into my mind of Akashic records. But in that there's nothing ever lost. And so what I'm teaching you now applies to your next life, your next reality, your next existence. And then you will not remember me, but you will remember a concept and you will think it's you thinking of it. But in fact, I put it in your head in a life that is now. And then when you get to another life, it won't be something that you read in a book or whatever. It will be something that is more akin to intuition. When I always say go vertical to get the truth, that's the same type scenario that I'm talking about. God, I hope this isn't rambling too long, but I think I've made my point on that. Is it possible to understand the concept of the paradox I told you and still become God enlightened? I don't think so. And the reason is because, as I said, the purpose of this reality in this particular life, the purpose is that you experience reality without any proof of God, the real God, without any proof that God is real or what the character traits or the reality. That is the point and purpose, one of the major points and purpose of this particular life. So for that God to go around and shake your hand and go, hey, why, well, you've moved from this level of bliss to that level of bliss, and you're so smart and you're so aware, and you've added this and that and everything else, and you're so fantastic. Here, let me put the crowning jewel on your accomplishments, and we'll add this to your PhDs and everything else, and because you're so smart and you're so aware, and so here I am. That's a joke. That's never going to happen. It's never going to happen that way, ever. Not in any realm. Well, it does actually happen in this realm, but that particular God that does come to you is Satan, is Shiva. And you will be convinced that that is the crowning jewel in your accomplishments. That's the way it works in this realm. So if you do go from bliss to bliss and knowledge to knowledge and awareness and become greater and greater and more and more and more, and it's like, wow, I'm just this close, man. I'm this close to becoming God enlightened, and it's like, boy, it's going to happen any day now because I've got all these knowledge and awareness, and I can heal people with laying my hands on them, and I can do this and I can do that. The next thing is, and sure enough, it will happen. If you get that far in your life, sure enough, it will happen. And Shiva will appear to you. And you will be God enlightened, but not the right God. Because the right God, the God of all reality, Shiva doesn't even understand that God. Never will understand that God, which is the Brahma, which is the God that Jesus prayed to. That God is never going to appear to you, enlighten you in this particular realm, unless the paradox takes place. So today is the last day of the year of 2021. So I hope you have a better next year than we had this year. I'm telling you, the world is going to hell in a handbasket. It is pretty disgusting how evil people control the entire planet. It's quite amazing. It's quite amazing, actually, when you witness the gullibility of seemingly good people that are passively supporting the God of this world, which of course makes it a living hell for those that are have the true love of God in their hearts. I mean, when Christians know, when they're taught that Jesus is the example. Okay, well, if Jesus is the example, do you want to get hung on a cross? Oh, well, I don't want that example. No, 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 no. I want love, joy, bliss. That's what I want. That's what Jesus promised. He didn't promise those things. You're an idiot if you think he promised those things. Unless you've fallen for the trap that Jesus was referring to Shiva as God. And then, of course, then you don't get hung on a cross. Anyways, thank you very much for watching. And I absolutely love you, as Jesus loved those that had the true love of God in their hearts. Because it's universal. All those that are and will and ever become one with God universally love one another with every heart, with every might, mind, and strength. Because that is the sustaining power behind the force of God, is love. It isn't anything else. It's love. That's the power of God. That's the power behind this. Why people would follow someone like Christ. Not because of rules and regulations, but because of love. Anyways, thank you for watching, and I hope you have a good New Year. And I love you.